don't know what was going on, it was crazy. Okay, so here's the thing, I feel like this is, when I went through it, and the reason why I went through and I redid and I gave you new notes is because this really honestly is the most important thing that we're gonna cover. So, that's why I was just like, oh no, she's not gonna be here. So, the effective lesson, okay? So we talked about lesson plans, but now we're gonna talk about actually teaching a lesson, okay? So you've gotta have both. You gotta have a good lesson plan, and you've gotta be able to teach the lesson, okay? So you'll notice we're missing the T in the lesson plan, because whenever we copy and paste, for some reason, it decides to omit the T, and I've tried, I cannot get the T back in there, don't know why. So, we started off with, which we're just gonna go through really quickly. Main jobs of teaching are delivering effective lessons, and then I think there, you have an added fill-in, I gave you a new one, right? So that's 800 to 1,000 lessons per year. That's a lot of lessons you're teaching, okay? Most of it is on the job training, that was on there, but then I added good teachers improve every year. There's always those kids, those teachers that are not good teachers, and they don't improve every year, but the goal is to improve and get better and better and better. That's why a 12 or 13-year teacher is gonna be a better teacher than a first-year teacher, okay? Good teachers must be able to use all types of instructional methods and know when each one is appropriate. So we've already talked about direct instruction. We've talked about discussion. We've talked about cooperative. We've talked about constructivist thinking, like when we're working with presenting a problem. There are times when all of those different things are appropriate, but you have to know when they're appropriate, okay? Lesson methods, again, direct instruction, discussion, cooperative learning, and other constructivist teaching. Directive instruction, we said, is the most effective and efficient way to present information, skills, and concepts, okay? It's for lessons where you transmit information directly to students, structuring class time to reach a clearly defined set of objectives as efficiently, and it should say as possible. Did we have that one in there?
Yes.
It's best for a well-defined body of knowledge. Means when there's one answer, okay? That's why Mr. B, when he does his triangle, this is a triangle, there's 22 different ways to solve it. That's very different than teaching 5 plus 5. 5 plus 5 is 5 objects plus 5 objects, which hopefully, if you're in the Christian school, still equals 10. Public school, they've decided to come up with some interesting things in that, okay? Also, information that all students must master, okay? So we have the beginnings of everything. When you're teaching, for example, grammar, you have a definition of a noun, a definition of a verb, a definition of an adjective. That doesn't change. Now, when you talk about teaching creative writing, now we're talking, there's more discussion, there's more going back and forth. There's not one way to write a sentence, there's lots of different ways to write a sentence, okay? Recent research has supported the idea that direct instruction can be more efficient than discovery in conceptual development as well. So that being said, with all the push within the public schools and in all of our textbooks that come out of a secular mindset, they push constructivists, yet research shows it works better if you actually do use direct instruction, okay? Basic steps of a direct instruction lesson. What did we get to? Do you remember?
I think we finished that. So we got to conducting learning probes.
Okay, so basic steps. Review and check your prerequisite knowledge. That goes under the section in our lesson plans called review. Then we tell students what they're gonna learn. That's what is called the engage section. And now that you've all seen a lesson plan, you know what I'm talking about. Then we have the teach new information. That goes under our explain section. Then we give opportunity for practice. That goes under evaluate. So once we have taught a concept, now we have to figure out, can they actually do what we taught? So evaluate in the early stages does not necessarily mean a quiz and a test. Later on, you have learning probes, and that's when we look at quizzes and tests. But we don't just teach long division and then give them a quiz. We teach long division, we practice long division, and then later on we have a quiz, okay? The textbook describes these steps. It says state the learning objectives. What do we want students to know or be able to do at the end of the lesson? And that is the whole purpose of why we have you write goals and objectives on your lesson plans when you're doing student teaching, because we want you to think about what is the main concept you're trying to get across to a student, okay? State or write them on the board. That is something that is done in public school. The writing of them on the board, if you've watched any videos, they'll have them usually in like the left-hand corner. And then it's funny, I saw some videos that said that I guess they did some research and found that that did nothing. That being said, you should be telling kids, especially when you're looking at things like history and science, you should be telling them, like, what is the concept we're trying to like, we're gonna be discussing the causes of the Civil War, okay? Because your objective is to get them to understand what the causes of the Civil War is. Sometimes we get up there and we rattle off a whole bunch of information and they have no idea what they're supposed to take away. So I think it is helpful, okay? I'm gonna jump to the next slide for a second. Oh yeah, I can't stretch these, I forget. Communicating objectives to students, okay? I tried to lay in, that is not, when I did this, I feel like it looks like blood. That's not blood, it's highlighting this other page. I'm like, what did I get on that page? It's page what, 165?
I cannot even see.
Yeah, because I'm gonna have to look at my book to be able to go through. I want you guys to make sure that you read this. And I started talking to a couple of my student teachers and saying, you need to go back. If you still have this book, you need to go back and read this. Because I think this will help with some of the issues that we get into with actually teaching a lesson. So let's look at 165, okay. Okay, instructional objectives. We're just gonna jump to number 1. The objectives you communicate to students should be broad enough to encompass everything that the lesson will teach. Research suggests that giving students too narrow a set of objectives may lead them to devalue or ignore other meaningful aspects of the lesson. In addition, broad objectives provide greater flexibility for adapting instruction as needed once the lesson is underway. So here we go. When you write an objective is supposed to be specific, okay? Now, I'm not saying that you sit there and you read each individual one to them, but it's probably a good idea to come up with a broader idea that you're going to communicate to the students. Because you may have, identify what a noun and a pronoun is, identify what the object of the preposition is. And so you might make it just one broad statement that encompasses everything. But that being said, when you write them in a lesson plan, they need to be specific, okay? The objectives you communicate should be specific enough in content to make it clear to the students what the outcomes of their learning will be, what they will know and be able to do, and how they will use the knowledge and skill. Consider stating objectives orally in writing, and that's in the public school, they put them on the board. I'm not saying, that might not be a bad idea to put it in the corner, like this is what we're working on for today, so kids have an idea. Teachers often use verbal, written outlines, or summaries of objectives. Providing demonstrations or models of learning products or outcomes is also effective. For example, an art teacher might show a student's drawing that demonstrates the use of perspective to illustrate what students will be able to produce themselves. Or a math teacher might show a problem that students could not do at the beginning of the series of lessons, but will be able to do at the end. I actually do this with students when I'm starting to argue with, I don't do it at the beginning, but because I'm not usually teaching them in the beginning. But what ends up happening is I end up with students who think that they don't have to learn fractions, okay? And so I will eventually draw a fraction up on the board that is in algebra that has like polynomials and all kinds of letters. And I will explain to them that we are not just doing fractions that look like this. We're gonna do fractions that look like this, and we're gonna have one big giant fraction with letters, and we're gonna have to divide it by another giant fraction, and we're gonna have to actually get common denominators with algebraic equations. And unless you understand the basics of fractions, you're not gonna be able to do this, okay? Now, that would be better done if I were the person teaching them in the beginning, showing them and saying, hey, listen, I know that we're struggling with fractions, but we're gonna need this concept so that we can build into these bigger and bigger concepts. Unfortunately, kids don't connect things. They have a tendency to think that I'm gonna do this for a very short period of time and then I'm not gonna have to do it anymore. So if I get a C in that part, as long as I understand the other stuff, I'm fine. Not realizing fractions will continue to rear their ugly heads until we are done with math. Consider using questioning techniques to elicit from students their own statements of objectives or outcomes. Their input will probably both reflect and inform your lesson plan. Some teachers ask students to express their ideas for meeting objectives or demonstrating outcomes because research suggests that students have a stake in the lesson plan and a sense of control over their learning will be more motivated to learn. This goes back to humanistic models, is that we have to give them control, we have to let them guide instruction. If they understand what they're supposed to learn, they may actually understand it. Will it motivate them? I don't know. Some kids are intrinsically motivated, some kids are not. I think if they understand what they're supposed to do, that's gonna help us in the end, okay? Let me double back to where we were before. So the textbook gives us these steps. They say, state the learning objectives, review prerequisites, present new material, conduct learning probes, provide adequate practice, assess performance and feedback, and provide distributed practice and review, which we consider homework, okay? So those are the steps according to the textbook we use, and so basically at the top, I gave you that in a nutshell of how it applies to a BECA lesson that we do in the Christian school, okay? Now we're gonna look at each individual component, okay? Reviewing prerequisites. First of all, you have to figure out, are they ready for the skill that you're actually teaching? I always use this example. I'm teaching 7th grade. I have them get out their map skills books. I assign map number 1 something or other, and that's their assignment, okay? Well, here's the problem. Everybody starts raising their hands. What's a continent? How do you calculate longitude and latitude? They're asking me all these questions that I assumed knowledge. Now, the interesting thing is that you have to look at in the Christian school is just because something is in the curriculum does not necessarily mean it was actually covered by the previous teachers. So for example, now I don't know what's going on now, but usually with ABECA around 4th grade, they would start writing their first little kind of mini paper in language. So 4th grade, they would write a little bit of something, 5th, and they're in the process of changing everything. So 5th grade, they would write, remember there's like a report, which is the one where you write the report over a person. Is that our 4th or 5th?
That over a person, that's 7th grade. But
no, there was one of them in the elementary school.
I know 4th grade they do like, or 5th grade they do a small report on like trees or something like that for science.
Okay.
But then the following year in English, you have the big library research report, LRR, that you work the whole year on.
Okay.
Like you choose a topic in the first few weeks of class, and you don't turn it in until almost the end of the year.
Okay.
And it's only 500 words, but
you have the beginnings of it.
Yeah, you've never written a paper before like this, so it's like.
But like, here's the thing I'm gonna tell you. In my history class, I assigned them like a little mini report on a person, and I figured they'd all be able to do it, and no one knew how to do it because here they don't do it till 7th grade. They don't write their first paper until 7th grade.
What?
Yes.
I feel like that puts you way behind.
Yes, and so you have to check to make sure what they're doing. Like, here's the thing. Sometimes they do current events. Some teachers don't do current events. So if you're the first one doing it.
I hated those.
Yeah, no one likes it. Well, I shouldn't say that. Probably some people do. I don't like current events either. So you have to make sure the kids have the prerequisites. I just assumed, because I had been doing the video classes with my kids, they had all been working on math skills projects for years. So I assumed they all knew what a continent was, what longitude and latitude was, what all these different things are. So here you go. No matter what you're doing, you have to check to make sure. You can't just assume they know, okay? And so we had to stop the project day and we had to go back over, okay? And with the continent, it was just a matter of nobody remembered not nobody, but a few of them did not remember what that word meant. They knew North America, South America, Africa, the terminology got them, okay? Why do we do this? It gives them a framework for understanding the new material. One thing that you can do is to check prerequisites is to give a quiz or a speed drill, okay? We do that in math all the time. We're doing little speed drills. Gives a framework for, it doubles.
It
Yeah, that's where, So let me see if I called like that. Let me see. Yeah, and then you'll notice it says, so we have what? We have 3 of them. So if I go like this, and yeah. Well, first of all, it deleted the whole thing. Okay, let's go back to play this way. I can make the
There we go.
corrections. Yeah, and compare it to here, because like I said, and I kept trying to fix it and trying to fix it, and the more I tried to fix it, put one slide on sideways this way. I'm like, really? Like, what did I do that did that? Okay, so then we have engage, okay? So in our lesson plan, we're always gonna have some type of drill and review. So here we go. If we're talking about prepositions, you've got a preposition and you've got an object of the preposition. The object of the preposition is a noun. So we have to make sure, do we know what a noun is, okay? So engage, arousing interest. That involves humor, stories, presenting a problem that you need to learn the skills to solve. We've talked about the cookie example. It's my favorite example. Make the material personally relevant to them, okay? If things are personally relevant, it holds our attention better. Now, Pastor Clark has been working on, we've been going through all the doctrine in Acts, okay? And so it's harder for me to focus my attention when it's something, like when he preaches topically and he's talking about something that's affecting me personally in my life, it's very easy for me to follow and pay attention. If he's talking about something, especially too, if it's doctrine that I understand, if it's something I don't understand, then it piques my curiosity. But if he's talking about something that I do understand, it's harder for me and it's harder for kids to focus their attention because of the fact that you already know. So if it's above your level, it's hard. If it's something you already know, it's hard. If you can find a way to get them to become invested. When we hit car insurance in math, everybody's like interest peaked because they all know they're gonna have to buy car insurance and they wanna understand car insurance. As opposed to when we were talking about, like Social Security deductions. I mean, they're like 18 years old, they could care less about Social Security at this point. Okay, now get a bunch of older people and you're discussing Social Security, you're gonna pique their interest, okay? So the idea is to get them somehow personally involved. Why do you need to know this, okay? Some of them will care, some of them won't. Attention, making sure kids have appropriate class behavior. Now, we want humor and we want fun, but at the same time, we also want focus, okay? And so we can't have, even though we're having, we're trying to engage them, we're trying to have fun with it, we can't have, everything fall to pieces and kids are just acting crazy. That's not gonna help either. Arouse curiosity and interest. Mr. Howe, did you ever, Mr. Howe is, yeah. Mr. Howe's chef's hat. So when he would do all the baking conversions, he would wear a chef's hat. He had all different little things that he would
video students would send him desserts.
Would they really?
Yeah, they would send him there's this one time he said, "I got this pie sent to me by so and so in this place." Said, "I just want to say thank you," or oh, these cookies were made by so and so. I'm sorry you video students weren't able to enjoy these with us, but you'll just have to make some on your own using the conversions that we just learned. And so,
oh, that's so much fun. And so, Mr. Howe had a way of getting kids excited. And that didn't mean his classroom was out of control, but he got kids excited and aroused their interest, okay? And so that's what our engage section is, okay? I find for me, those are the most difficult because you have to find a way to make something interesting, okay? Present new material, explain, okay? This is the biggest body of everything that we're talking about. I probably should have split it into 2 slides, okay? First of all, you have to organize the material into appropriate size. That's like a weird typo. Organize material into the appropriate size and present it logically. So having all that information on one slide, is that helpful or confusing? No, it's extremely confusing, see? Because I did not organize the material.
This is very good, this is why.
This is a good example
just keep it like
of
that.
why I actually am gonna leave it that way. It should have a clear, organized structure, okay? This is one of the things that could become difficult, is that you think something's gonna be easy to explain, but that it's not, okay? With English and arithmetic, I feel like students really need steps to figuring something out. And so what I've started to do with my consumer math is I literally take a concept and I break it down into steps so that I can more clearly communicate what I need to communicate. Use language like, and I put quotations in yours, right?
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
like use language that blank the importance that is really
Yeah,
important.
use language, yeah, because I didn't change on the slide. Use language that communicates is what it's supposed to say, the importance. Things like, it is really important to understand. I have told you, remember we got to like variable ratio schedules? I said, these will be on the test. You need to know all 4 of these.
And I still got them wrong.
Did not get them right anyway. So you want to communicate the things that are the main points. You want to repeat the main points. If you're doing something that requires steps, you want to write the steps. You want to repeat the steps. You probably want to have the whole class chorally recite the steps and have everybody say it together, okay? Don't interrupt the flow of the lesson by rabbit trails to tell stories that you don't need to tell, because, ooh, I just remembered this. Ooh, I just remembered that. Ooh, oh, wait a minute, I gotta get a book out of the closet, okay? So you wanna keep the flow of the lesson moving, okay? Here we go. Use steps in language and arithmetic and have kids repeat them back to you, okay? Effective explanations are at the core of effective teaching, okay? Difference between a good teacher and a bad teacher: a good teacher knows how to explain something. They know how to break it down, they know how to make it clear, they don't muddy it with trying to explain too many things all at once, and this is a skill that does develop over time, okay? They give you in the book something called rule, example, rule, where they say you give the rule, then you give an example, and then you repeat the rule. And so it always drives me crazy when they use science ones, because I don't teach science. So for science, they say matter may change forms, but it's never destroyed. So that's the rule. The explanation is, if I were to burn a piece of paper, it would appear the paper is gone. But in fact, it would have combined with oxygen atoms from the air and changed to a gas, mostly carbon dioxide and ash. If I could count the atoms in the paper plus the atoms from the air before and after I burned the paper, we could see that matter involved did not disappear, but merely changed forms. Though they restated the rule at the end when they said we could see that the matter involved did not disappear, but merely changed forms. So they stated the rule, they explained an example, and that's on page 167 under explanations. They gave you a rule, they gave you an example, and then they gave you the rule again, okay? So when you're doing it, you could do it with English, where you give the rule, then you do an example, and then you state the rule again. So it's sandwiching the example between the rule that's repeated twice. Had used. Okay, so it's on teeny tiny little letters. I have to look at the board. Demonstration, models, and illustrations. Okay, as much as humanly possible, visual representations you're going to use them because they're maintained in long-term memory far more readily than information that is only heard. Leanne did the other day, she did moon phases, and they did it with Oreo cookies. I guarantee you, kids are gonna remember that
so smart.
Longer than if you had stood up there, showed a couple pictures of moon phases, and just talked about it. Now, obviously, that takes time. That's why. It's probably why I'm not a huge fan of having to do projects, because you have to gather all the materials, you have to do it with the students, and then you have to clean it up. Which is probably why I don't like science, because I feel like science is best taught with doing a lot of different activity type things. And then I have to get all the supplies, and I'm just not into that.
Costs money. Yeah.
Yeah. Embedded video, a lot of the curriculum that they are releasing now, Rebecca has like little snippets of 2 to 3 minute videos. Like for instance, I remember when I was teaching history, there was one that showed the dispersion of people from the Fertile Crescent out into the broader areas of the continents. And it was like 2 or 3 minutes. So if you have digital things, it's great. But that being said, you shouldn't spend your whole class watching videos. There are some great little mini grammar videos that you know about and showing like a 3 minute or a 5 minute video. But you should be sitting at the back of the class while kids are watching videos and they're learning from videos. They're supposed to be learning from you, okay? So, where are we now? We are at,
maintaining attention. Pay attention to the students.
Maintaining attention. This is the biggest mistake I see student teachers make. And the reason why you make the mistake is because you're standing up there, you're trying to do something you've never done, you're trying to teach a lesson, and at the same time, you have all these students that you're supposed to be watching. And so your main focus when you're a new teacher becomes what you're doing. You have to pay attention to what you're doing and what they're doing. And so Marissa had a funny story yesterday. They were doing like addition or something, and she asked them something like, the question was like 5 + 1, and then the kid answered 6, but she was being observed. Someone came in to observe like a family that was looking at the kindergarten, and so she was really, really nervous, so that she forgot what the problem was, and then she wasn't sure if the kid was right because she wasn't sure what problem she asked, and then she got herself all nervous, and we were laughing. It's like, she's like, I know 5 + 1 is 6. I'm like, well, yes, we all know, but you have those moments where you're doing something and people are watching you, and then you get nervous, and then you forget what you asked or what you said, and then you have to kind of go back, and you don't. So you have to pay attention to the students, watch for kids. The other thing that I see across the board is that I get it all the time from the host teachers. Kids are sitting with their hands raised in the back of the classroom, and the student teacher doesn't even notice them because they're so focused on what they're doing up here that they don't, and it happens with every single one of them, okay? So make sure as you're teaching, you're looking around and observing who's doing what. Classroom management, you need to make sure that you're calling on students randomly. You have to try not to be dry and boring, okay? Try to make it exciting. Try to have a smile on your face. Try to be pleasant. Nobody likes a teacher who just stands there and drones on. And we've all had people do that. And you're just like, please, Lord, just get me out of here, okay? Content, coverage. What is the amount of material that you're gonna be able to get done in your class, and how fast are you gonna be able to go? So this is what I recommend. When you're having to pace things out and you don't have specific amounts, what you need to do is you need to be over prepared. So here we go. If you're teaching a lesson and you know what that focus is, and even if it's laid out in ABECA, have written off to the side a couple extra things that you can do. Have some extra worksheets, have some extra games, have some just extra stuff that you can do if you come up short. If you come up to the point where, like for me in math, I like to have 2 weeks worth of lesson plans in my little blocks written out. I had to stop because I never know how far I'm going to be able to get with them. The group tends to move slow. Now I make sure that I prep ahead, but at the same time, like we've been working on this insurance thing. We worked on it on Monday. Then they were all gone on Tuesday for fine arts, so we just went over some of the problems. Then we worked on it on Wednesday. I still have some people that are confused about the last portion of it. I thought we would be done and would start the next section, and we're not gonna start the next section until when they come back. Now they're gone for faith for Thursday and Friday. We won't. So we're like on 4 days on the same lesson, okay? So I can't lay out the blocks because then I have to white everything out, okay? So sometimes depending on what your group is, I'm not saying you don't prep, like I know where I'm going. I have 7.5, then I'm doing 7. I'm on a 7.6, then I'm gonna do 7.7, 7.8. I've already gone through and I have it in my head what I need to do. I just haven't written it all out in my book yet because I'm still waiting to get through 7.6 with these people. Pacing, how fast? Okay, some lessons need to be broken down. Other times you may be able to cover more than one lesson in a lesson period. So you gotta know what's coming next. If you don't know what's coming next, what are you gonna do when you've only got, you've got 20 minutes left and everybody all of a sudden got this? And then I had a weird experience at math because my one student who doesn't get anything, he actually got something very easily, and one of the other students who usually gets everything didn't get it at all, and then I was just lost. I'm like, why are you not getting this? I'm not quite sure. Okay. Learning pros. So how do you figure out what your pacing is going to be? Okay, it comes from all of this, from learning pros. Okay, so we have, what do we have? What time is it? It's 8. Yeah, we're done at what, 8:45?
The first hour, yeah.
Again. Learning pros, okay? So what we're talking about is figuring out, have they actually learned what you've tried to actually teach them, okay? It may seem simple, you're like, okay, I get up there and I teach, and then they do it, and then what if they do it all wrong? It does actually happen more often than you think. What do you have to do? So you're gonna use verbal questions, you're gonna use written questions. Sometimes it's I like exit tickets. You know what the concept of an exit ticket is? Okay, so normally whenever you do something, now if you're doing grammar in general, what you're doing is you're doing the activities that are in the book. Sometimes you may need more than one activity, so that's why it's helpful to have worksheets. If you're doing things like history and science, what I found was the section reviews at the end. They would not read anything I told them to read. They would skim through the section review and they just pull out the factual information that they needed. So what I started doing is I gave them what's called an exit ticket. An exit ticket is a little piece of paper, it's usually a half sheet of paper, and it assesses whether you actually can apply whatever you learned to some type of case scenario. So for instance, in history, instead of having 5 section review questions, I would give them a broader, higher level Bloom's taxonomy question that required them to actually process what I had talked about in class, okay? So it would be like a really broad. Now I would make sure when I was teaching the lesson that I clearly communicated the answer to it because I was still teaching 7th and 8th grade. So I wasn't teaching high schoolers at such a high level that they could just, mesh all the information abstractly in their brain. I made sure I communicated, and then at the end of the day, rather than make them do a second review, I would give them that little exit ticket, and quite a few of them went to war with me. They were really not happy because they had a system in their head. I sit here, I daydream, I don't pay attention, and then I fill out the section review and I'm done. By giving them the exit ticket, which required them to process the information, they actually had to pay attention in class. And I graded the exit tickets, okay? Now, technically, when you do an exit ticket, the way the exit tickets work is you're not supposed to be able to go on to the next thing until you can pass the exit ticket. But that only works in a situation where everybody works individually. Yes?
I'm gonna say they're switched on schoolhouse curriculum. They force you aren't allowed to move forward to anything new until you've gotten at least an 80 on every quiz. So they say every student has A's and B's, and that every student graduates with A's and B's.
Yeah, because they have to.
They don't.
See, that's how I homeschooled. If my kids did not get a minimum of like an 85 or an 87 on something, we went back and we worked on it till they could. So like at the lower levels, I didn't give them an enormous amount of tests on different subjects because I made sure even with the math, you had to be able to do it. Until you could do it, you can't go on to the next thing. Now you can do that when you're homeschooling. Did I show you the video yet from, there is a video, I don't like the organization itself because it's a very liberal humanistic organization, but it has an education model, and there's like a video, and they do English papers, and it's an inner city district where kids are frequently out because of evictions, parents in prison. It's like an inner city Philly type place. And what they do is they watch videos and then they do exit tickets. So I probably didn't show it to you yet. I don't know at what point I show it, but I will show it to you. It's a really interesting model for if you had a really small Christian school where you actually video all of your lessons and then kids work at their own pace. Now, we don't generally do that in the Christian school, but if you had a small Christian school, or if you had some type of learning center within a Christian school where kids were being pulled out because they couldn't do like almost like a modified special education program, it has some value and it allows you to change the pacing of something, okay? Their response to the questions, their response to written questions, their responses to the work that's in the book, which is why you should be walking around and checking work as students are doing it. That's what sets the pace for instruction, okay? So if we can't find the we have to, first of all, we have to memorize all the prepositions before we can actually consistently find the prepositional phrases. So in the beginning, they can have a copy of it, but later on, whether you move on to the next concept, you need to make sure that as a whole, majority of the class has it. Now, that does not mean every student's gonna have it, and so those are the kids that are gonna need extra help at some point. If the class doesn't understand, you need to slow down and not research and reteach. That should say reteach. And that should say two, oh my soul, 1 or 2 students cannot hold up the whole class. That's the other mistake that teachers make, is that they stop the whole class. I taught 6th grade for a short period of time when we were up in New England because I was teaching college classes, and Dr. Blazer eventually decided it was just too much for me to do that and the college classes. So he told them no, so he pulled me out of there. I had one student who came out of public school and she just literally could not do the work. There was only like 4 or 5 students in the class, but she couldn't do long division. She didn't know her multiplication. And I remember going to the principal and he's like, you just gotta keep on going. He said, you can't hold the whole class up for one student. And it just killed me because I'm like, what am I supposed, he's like, she's gonna need to get tutored. Check for understanding as you're teaching, ask questions, make sure they understand, okay? In general, I was watching Leanne teach math the other day. You do the one example on the board when you get to the practice, and then you kind of go around and you walk around. And so I'll do the same thing with my college English class. I'll do like 1 or 2 of them, we'll do them together. First I'll teach it, we'll do some examples, then we'll start, and actually I probably more realistically do 4 or 5 with them. And then I let them take over, and then they do 4 or 5 of them, and then we go through all the answers to see if everyone's got it, okay? Asking questions in science, what do you suppose? Sometimes the questions come before you even start. What do you think is gonna happen? In reading, sometimes inferring information from a passage in reading, that's for literature. Asking questions, what do you think is gonna happen? What does this actually mean, okay? Using a variety of types of questions, Bloom's taxonomy. We cannot just have all the who's and the what's and the where's and the when's. We have to have the why is this happening? Explain how this affects this. Some of the problems with asking questions, sometimes we lead, you've all heard me do it, where I start to ask the question and I answer the question within the body of the question, accidentally. If you lead them too strongly, it's gonna suggest the answer. Asking questions all at one level, all at that bottom level of Bloom, or failing to correct wrong answers. Now, there's a way to correct people when they're incorrect, and there's a way not to correct people, okay? You don't scream out, wrong, that's not it. Like, sometimes you can, say, well, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. Think about and give them some added information. Like, you want to try to be gentle about it. You don't want to be rude or not nice. I've seen teachers do that too. Ignoring answers, asking too many yes or no questions. Sometimes students, we were watching an A. Becker reading class, and what she was asking them is she wanted to know what kind of sound the vowel made, but they were in 1st grade. And so they had no idea what she was asking. And I don't remember exactly how she worded it, but it was very vague. Even the students that were here didn't know I knew what she was asking, but they didn't know what she was asking. And then finally, I think one of them said something, and she said, does it make its long sound or its short sound? And all of a sudden, now yes, she did give them a 50-50 chance of getting it, but honestly, they had no idea what information she was even looking for. So sometimes giving them choices will actually help, so they at least know what ballpark they're supposed to be in. Wait time, this is my favorite. How long? How long do you wait? In the textbook, it explains most teachers ask a question and within like a split second, they're answering the question. 3 to 5 seconds is a long amount of time to wait. And you have to become comfortable with the silence when no one answers.
Homiletics.
Homiletics is like that, where he'll ask a question.
Well, he tries teaching us to pause when we're preaching. And so it's like when you're preaching, you have to pause for 3 to 5 seconds to add effect. He said, if I want you to get something, then I'm going to pause. And it's really awful. And the whole point is like, you think, whenever there's a pause, then what you're going to do is just, as a listener, all you're thinking about is the last thing that they said. And so it's when to add the pauses.
When to add the pause. And so that's actually an effective teaching thing. The pause is good for behavior. That's another one. You just stop and you're just quiet and you just look at everybody. What?
I did that on the bus the other day.
Did you?
It's terrible. Everyone on our bus is education majors. Almost everyone.
Okay.
So we were using Miss Betty. We were like, all right, who can do the best Miss Betty teacher voice? And so like it was just random. We were like messing with each other. Like no riders were on the bus yet. Like, Faith, you're being disrespectful. I need you to stop. And it was really funny. It was like going back and forth. Eventually we had to stop because it went too far. But
Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. We're gonna take a pause at the pause. I'm gonna go use the ladies' room.